So, hello everyone. I'm Duncan Fraser from Useful and Kind Unlimited, a charity that's trying to help people to be more useful and kind, which clearly in the world at the moment is never more needed. And today's video is a tool that I've been using for a long time. I devised it when I was working with a client some time ago, and it's now been used by hundreds of coaches, managers, people that work in a variety of sectors, and we've called it the Critical Relationship Tool. Now, critical doesn't mean it's awful, it's terrible. It just means an important relationship. So it could be a loved one, it could be someone in a family that maybe is not everything is wonderful with them at the moment. It might be someone who's been called difficult at work, might be your boss, might be a supplier, a commissioner, and it basically gives you the opportunity to sit and think and hold the other person in order to understand better what's going on in that relationship and how you can improve it. And it builds on all the things that you've learned in the other videos so far, which I'll talk about. But there are basically 7 questions, that's all. They're very rich and they're full of understanding about what has informed that person and the relationship, and indeed you. And they start with the first question, which is, what's the person like? Just describe them. And just use some adjectives to describe them. Maybe what you feel about them. But what are they like? What do they do? Just give that kind of description. And you might want to pause the video after each question so that you can just jot down these things, because they're important to collect together at the end and will help you. I spent a few minutes on each one. The second question is just trying to understand them, trying to understand what's going on for that person. Don't make any judgment, just observe, try and make some observations. But you've already got from these videos some tools that might help you to do that. So we did in an early video negative automatic thoughts. So just which of those applies to this other person? Do they normally have all or nothing thinking? Do they catastrophize? Do they personalize? Do they make everything about themselves? Are they half full? Is the focus always negative? Do they jump to conclusions? They're the first one to make some grand sweeping statement. Or do they live by fixed rules? That's the sort of person who says, I'm the sort of person who. Just think about their drivers that we covered in the last video. The please others, be strong, hurry up, try hard, and so on. And that long list of injunctions, all those kind of things. Just get a sense of them, of what's going on for them. As we say, their rich, glorious messiness. Just as you are rich and glorious and messy, and you've got all kinds of stuff going on, and you came to be who you are because of how you were loved and cared for, or maybe not so much early on. So too the other person. They have all that going on for them too in a different way. So just again, pause and have a think about the answers to that. So the question, just to remind you, is what's going on for them? Try to understand them. Okay, so the third question, sometimes people find a little more tricky. And the question is, what are their needs? So when I devised this, I was working with a client who worked on her boss. And it was a very straightforward thing of the boss seemed to want a lot of attention and seemed to want to get the credit for stuff that my client had done. And we just explored what that person's needs were, and they were to be seen to have been a good girl, to be seen to have made a difference, to be respected, and of course all of this always comes down to they wanted to be loved. They just didn't want to be judged other than well. And in the next video, when we look at difficult others, we will look at some of the kind of characteristics that lie behind some of those difficult people. But the question is, what are their needs? But if you can, do the straightforward, prosaic needs that they present in relationship with you or generally in the world, whether they're family and they need something particular from you or they appear to, or this works especially well in the workplace as well. So just pause and ask yourself that question. Now, the fourth question, sometimes people find a bit tricky to distance themselves from the question. And the question is, how can you meet those needs? Now, immediately you will think, well, I'm not going to meet their needs, or I can't meet their needs, or they're impossible, or whatever else. Just set that aside for a minute and think, how could those needs be met? Just leave yourself out of it. So in the case of the client I was talking about, then the person could have been credited a bit more. There could have been pictures in the company newsletter. There could have been all kinds of information that she was credited on in conversations with commissioners and sponsors and so on. She could simply have been contacted once in a while, thanked, noticed. Or at the other extreme, often I work with people who think that if they've got an OBE or a knighthood, that's the ultimate kind of gold star. And just find a way to think about how those needs could be met, remembering that the underlying need is not the photo in the newsletter, is not the knighthood, but is the being loved. And meeting that underlying need is much more powerful. Now, question 5, and this does come to you, is what would be the cost to you if you did meet their needs? So, to stick with this client, if they had met those needs in that way and put the photo in the newsletter and always had the board giving great recognition for what was going on and so on, then my client herself would not have been recognised, and she wouldn't have felt that she was doing what she was meant to do for her job. The cost would be, it would take a lot of time. It would mean that she wouldn't be able to do her own job as well as she would like to. So just pause and make a list of the costs to you of meeting the other person's needs. Okay, so in my view, question 6 is the killer question. And I'll tell you the question first and then I'll explain it, because the question's quite straightforward. It's what is similar in your patterns. Now, this comes from a clinical psychologist who always used to get called to do the really difficult stuff. And as he picked up the phone, he was a Buddhist, and he would think, what is there of the abuser in me? So he would accept that we are all the same. We are all made from carbon. We are all humans. We all share huge amounts of genetic material. If you have a faith, you might feel that we're all of one spirit and one faith. And as a great friend of mine uses the phrase, there's one sky, there's one earth, and there's one people. So it's in that spirit that you ask yourself, what's similar? What do we share? And that might be the same kind of things that you've looked at earlier on. So actually, do we share the same drivers, negative automatic thoughts, injunctions? How are we similar? Do we have the same needs? And this needs a bit of time, so just pause the video and spend some time on that. So, finally, having thought about the person and described them, secondly, try to understand them, thirdly, listed their needs, fourthly, looked at how those needs theoretically could be met, fifthly, considered the cost of meeting them, again, theoretically. Six is now having an understanding of what's similar. Then the final question, which is hugely important, is what are you going to choose to do? Mindful that you do have a choice. In the case of my client, she could not have really done what the boss wanted, but they are the boss. Mindful that you are not the other person's therapist in this situation. You're just trying to be a human, holding another human with unconditional positive regard, if you remember that from our first video. And just decide what you are going to do. Be mindful of it, choose it, and then just hold the other person as being little, as being held, as having no language, what caused them to be secure or insecure. And just reflect on how you can hold them with kind, sparkling eyes, offering the same compassion, loving tenderness, as you choose a new way of being with that person. I hope you find that helpful as others have. Have a good day. Thank you.